Hello and welcome to the sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Open Series in Las Vegas. I'm Nick Miller alongside someone you all probably remember, coverage coordinator of Days Old, Glenn Jones. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you, man?
Good. It's a
took
pleasure.
My seat, but I mean,
it's a pleasure to interview you, the master of this format. Deck checking, deck checking, of course.
Less so Legacy, although I try. I do. It is one of my favorite formats, and I play it a lot.
And you have
Legacy, not deck checking.
You have brought a spicy number that you've been talking about on Twitter, Facebook, and had to get you in here after had you on camera. Used to be called, or is called, Young Frankenstein.
Yep.
That Todd did a deck tech, I'm assuming, with you.
Todd, I don't even know if he played this in an event, actually. I remember I saw Todd had played it in a Legacy DE on Moto when I was going through the deck list, as I am wont to do. And I saw it, and I immediately fell in love with the very original incarnation, because I was like, this just seems sweet. I love hybrid combo decks. Young Pyromancer's a cool card. And I actually started playing it. Todd only played it, I think, like once or twice, maybe like 3 times. I played it for like 2 weeks, to the point where I had people like correcting articles to be like, no, that's not Todd's deck, that's Glenn's deck. Totally Todd's deck. I just played it a bunch because it was sweet. And so credit to Todd. And credit to Jesse Snyder, our director, on the great name Young Frankenstein.
I just remember reading the articles about it, and I was like, yeah. So what we've got going on here is a semi-reanimator, just super grindy value creature deck as well. You've got your Entomb package and Exhume, or Reanimate, to get your fatties, Grave Titan, Elish Norn, and out of the board Iona. But the part that I like about this deck, and that you big fan of, was Bloodghast, along with Young Pyromancer and all the interactions with the tokens, Cabal Therapy, you know. Tell me how you came about this specific package with Deathrite Shaman, and what your iterations can be.
The original Young Frankenstein was a little bit more on the Reanimator plan. It ran like Exhumes, and Young Pyromancer was really just an alternate kill kind of thing to let it, pound through some hate or take some games. I decided to build the deck more towards the Grixis Delver style shell being what you're putting everything inside of. So that's why one of the reasons I have main deck Deathrite Shaman's a card I noticed I reanimated a lot when I was playing Young Frankenstein, just because it's a good creature and fantastic. So I realized I would probably just want to play with my own. And really, that addition, in addition to wanting to play with Bloodghast and Entomb, is what kind of led me to come back to the deck, because those 2 card additions really just let you therapy someone's entire hand away on turn 2 pretty consistently. You can open on turn 1 Deathrite Shaman, and then you can go for a Young Pyromancer with another land to cast therapy, making a token, flashback therapy, sacking the token, make another token. You get to strip 2 cards, assuming you probed, or assuming you're a psychic genius.
Right.
The same way around, you can go turn 1 Entomb, turn 2 you can play a land, get back Bloodghast, cast therapy, flashback therapy, and then you still have a mana left over to spare for whatever you want to do. I bolt their creature, maybe. That sounds good. I do that a lot.
Yeah, the way these decks with this shell just rip apart people's hands, it's insane. I saw you against a Jund player. I'm assuming you probed him at one point because you named a pretty obscure card in his hand.
Oh yes, Erratic Explosion
yes.
is that one, yeah. I may or may not have seen that card previously. Although, to be fair, he had shown me Draco in the first game, so I would have been able to make that read. Right. That's just within my range.
Yes. Stone Cold Master, Soul Read.
I actually therapied Draco in the previous game, so... and yeah, like... The one of the nice things is you can strip apart someone's hand really quick, but when you do that, you need to kill them. Like, this is Legacy. Eventually, they're going to draw a Ponder or a Brainstorm or a Tarmogoyf or a True Gnosis or Stoneforge Mystic. All these cards that are capable of just one-shot killing you or killing you over like 3 turns pretty quickly. And when somebody's hand has been completely stripped of all the good cards, what better to do than put a gigantic fatty into play? The fatties I picked was actually kind of tough, and I turned to Twitter. I crowdsourced my fatty selection. I knew I wanted Elish Norn because Elish Norn is game over against a lot of decks in Legacy. Similarly, you can say the same about Iona, but I think that it's game over against a significantly narrower range.
Right.
Many of the more popular combo decks can actually beat an Elish Norn, or sorry, an Iona. For example, Sneak and Show can readily defeat an Iona, and it's probably the most popular combo deck. Right. Elves, 100% dead to Elish Norn, so I don't need an Iona to beat Elves.
Yeah, you on camera earlier against Elves.
Yeah. That's it, sorry.
Game over.
So I wanted a creature that was good against a lot of the fair decks and would be good against the combo decks, because I don't have the Iona in the main, so I need something that's good against combo. And when I crowdsourced it to Twitter, someone, I don't remember their Twitter handle, sorry, came up with the idea of Grave Titan which I know Reanimator decks have played previously as a card. And one of the things that goes a little underestimated is that Grave Titan is the fastest Reanimator target clock in Legacy.
Right.
It is the fastest it will kill them unchecked in 2 swings, which you can say about virtually no other card that can be targeted legally with the card Reanimate. I'm talking to you, Emrakul and Blightsteel Colossus.
Yeah, that's what you told me, and what really keyed it in on that card. I'm like, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Just on its own, straight up kills them.
You can just make a turn 2 Grave Titan a lot of the time with Entomb Reanimate, and then they're dead on turn 4, which against combo decks, like turn 4 is when you really want to be threatening to kill them, or just following with another volley of disruption to keep them from getting you.
Which this deck can definitely do.
Yeah.
And not only can you cast Dread Return in this deck, but you can also flash it back with all the tokens you're making for all of the value.
Yeah, Dread Return, I feel like some people talked about it a while ago when we first had the Young Pyromancer Reanimator deck, but it didn't really catch any any popularity at that point. But adding Bloodghast really makes it a lot easier. There's a big difference between 2 and 3 tokens, and you can do some tricks as well with being able to get an additional creature when people aren't expecting it.
Yep.
And the Dread Return, you don't use it all that often, but when you do, you're really glad you have it, because it lets Entomb turn into a Reanimator target and a Reanimator spell. Which is a pretty big deal when you have 2 Entombs and maybe you don't want to necessarily get a Therapy or Bloodghast, or you've already gotten those cards.
Yeah, one of those tricky situations came up against the Jund player when he had a Liliana trying to get rid of your True Name, which is in the sideboard. But you had the fetch land in place, so you could get Bloodghast back after sacrificing it when he destroyed it. Then with the Liliana effect, you were able to sacrifice it again.
If your opponents are casting Liliana the Veil, if you've just got a card shop full of people casting the card Liliana the Veil, this deck is fantastic. That card is rancid. I saw it +1 against me like maybe twice, because it just does nothing. Like they risk dying a lot of the time if they do it. Your Young Pyromancer defends himself very naturally. Bloodghast, obviously, a great weapon against Liliana. Yeah, it's just, you don't want to go there. Some considerations for the main deck that got cut kind of at the last minute. I debated adding a Lingering Souls to Entomb for to also be able to kind of help out the Dread Return, and also just maybe you need 2 blockers at a random moment. I never wanted to do it, so I cut it. Never, ever, ever. And then Faithless Looting, which was actually surprising because it was better than expected when I drew it naturally. But the reason I wanted it in my deck was that if I'm flooding, I can Entomb for it, pitch some lands, maybe draw some spells, maybe pitch some Reanimator targets, reanimate them. But likewise, I just never Entombed for it. It was only good when I naturally drew it, so I cut it for that reason.
Okay, let's take a look at the sideboard. Some of your stronger cards. You got some Force of Wills.
Yeah,
which is very necessary.
That's the big trick. Yeah, obviously the deck is a little vulnerable to combo in game 1. It's a deck built to fight fair decks. So I just decided to go a little soft against them in game 1, and then go real hard for the sideboard. And Force of Will is obviously a huge weapon against the most popular combo decks. So my deck actually frequently manages to kind of hit 2 birds with 1 stone, if so to speak, because against the combo decks, I want to have access to Force of Wills and Delver of Secrets, which is a much faster clock than anything else in my deck by a lot. So I want to be able to transform kind of into a pretty typical Grixis Delver deck, and also be able to threaten Entomb, Reanimate, Iona, which they can very rarely beat.
A lot of angles of attack.
Yeah, but against fair decks, these cards also work to let me transform into Grixis Delver. A lot of fair decks are going to be bringing in stuff like Grafdigger's Cage, Rest in Peace, even Surgical Extraction. And instead of being able to blow you out or lock you out of being able to reanimate Entomb, or even just bring back Bloodghast, you can just side out a significant amount of that package, usually the Reanimates, the Fatties, the Dread Return, and a couple copies of Entomb, and bring in Delver of Secrets, True Name Nemesis, and additional Umezawa's Jitte, all of which are cards that can just kill the opponent on their own, especially when the opponent has virtually mulled to 6 in search of a Rest in Peace or something like that.
With all their graveyard hate, you just kill them with a typical Delver type build.
Yeah, very frequently people find themselves just caught unawares, and the rest of the, obviously that takes up a lot of room in the sideboard. I even had to jam a Jitte and a Flusterstorm in the main deck as kind of hedges, using my flex slots, because I needed really badly a 17-card sideboard for this particular build. And after playing with it, I like the Force Wills on the board. The True Names were also very good, and I do have to give credit, actually. The True Name Nemesis were Jerry's idea. He looked at the deck list, and he didn't really like the Delvers that much. I felt like they were the only clock that's fast enough to kill a combo deck. But now that I've kind of played the format with this deck a little more, I think maybe you just need more aggressive sideboard cards, like more direct hate as opposed to Delvers. More Flusterstorms is an option. Maybe just another True Name Nemesis to let you still transform against fair decks, but you need to have a better anti-combo plan than I have right now, because I'm a little vulnerable, and Sneak and Show is a tough matchup, and it's one of the most popular ones out there.
go ahead and hit on a couple of the
Sure.
popular cards real quick and run down like Dread of Night.
I was worried about Death and Taxes. It's picking up a little bit. After playing the matchup, I actually think Death and Taxes is not that bad a matchup, and certainly if I have a card like Dread of Night, I can shut him down. You have to remember that Elishnorn's more of a Wrath of God than an Elishnorn against them because they have many ways to get it off the board. But Grave Titan, one of the reasons I liked it so much was it's not a legend. So they can't Caracas it back to your hand. If they swords it, you still get to keep the tokens, which are actually something against them. So it's a great card against Death and Taxes. They can actually struggle to beat it a lot. So, and the Jittes also kind of let me hedge. I decided to run 2 Jitte instead of 2 Dread of Night and 1 Jitte because I felt like it would be comparable, but I'd get more options in other matchups. And truth be told, I didn't draw the Jittes very often, but I like them a lot still because they're just good in a variety of matchups. And also, against decks like Burn or other Fringe decks, they can just be live. It's a card you can board in against a lot of decks.
There was a lot of Burn here today.
Yeah, I didn't get to play against any of it.
Yeah, there was a ton of it at the top table. So
the Sylvan library, I was running a Jace the Mind Sculptor in that slot. At the last minute, I decided to do Sylvan. They're both cards just for the Miracles matchup, pretty much. But the exception is Sylvan I can actually bring in against some decks like Jund. Whereas Jace, I can't really afford to do that because of the presence of Wasteland. So that was why I went with that. And Ancient Grudge is a no-brainer in any Entomb deck. It's a no-brainer in most decks with access to red and green mana in the format. Yeah. Very powerful. I was running 2 for a really long time, and I just decided to cut it down to 1 because the Jittes, again, it kind of moves over into the space that I'm trying to interact with. I don't need to worry about opposing Jittes if I can just Jitte their guys to death. And since my deck has Bolts, Therapy, its own Jittes, feels like I can get that advantage pretty quickly.
Definitely take advantage of the fair matchups.
Yeah.
Well, moving forward, is there anything you would switch, or would you like to continue working on this deck? Or
yeah, the deck was a lot of fun. In fact, my primary criticism of my tournament is definitely I need to get better at playing it. It's a very complicated deck. You'll notice if you look over the deck, virtually everything in the deck costs 1 mana. There's like the 4 Young Pyromancers, and then everything else is either 1 mana or designed to be gotten back from the graveyard for 1 or less mana. So you have a lot of options every turn. Your Brainstorms and Ponders can really change what you might do depending on what they reveal, and that's super important to keep in mind. It's not always correct to start the turn with your Brainstorm or Ponder, but it can frequently be correct because you might be like, well, I can strip away all of his cards this turn. That might be good, and then you're like, oh wait, I could have just put a Grave Titan into play. That's probably better. So you got to kind of keep in mind your cantrips and also how to get value out of the tokens for Young Pyromancer.
Just a ton of options.
I have the 2 flex slots in the main deck, which were the 1 Jitte and the Flusterstorm. Those could really be anything. I'm just kind of still trying stuff out there. I think I'm going to try replacing the Delvers and going a little more aggressively on just anti-combo cards. Haven't decided what they are yet, but I'll figure that out.
I'm sure you'll keep us all posted.
Yeah, the deck's a lot of fun. I highly recommend it if you want to play some sweet interactive games of Legacy. And every now and then you just get to Elishnorn and Elves player and not do that. So.
Well, Glenn, thank you for joining me here in the sideboard, your old stomping ground. I'm sure everyone at home is looking forward to looking at this, and they've been talking about it on Twitter. So thank you again. Excellent. For Glenn Jones, I'm Nick Miller in the sideboard. Stay tuned for more action all weekend long here at the StarCityGames.com series in Las Vegas.